This week we have Jessica and Edward from the YouTube channel How to ADHD, where they teach people to have tips and tricks and insights to figure out more about the ADHD brain. So they both have ADHD, and this is actually one of my favorite episodes. And
I was not there, and I was super bummed to miss it.
Which is why I think it was one of the best episodes, because
great,
you weren't there. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. It was one of my favorites, despite you not being there.
It's great. I know. I listened to it today, and it's awesome.
All right.
So
I got your approval, so I hope you enjoy. Hey, welcome to the Mr. Feels podcast. I am Tyler May, and today I'm joined with Edward and Jessica from How to ADHD. How are you guys doing?
Good. Tired.
Very awesome. Super
You guys have
tired.
had a long day. We're in the Patreon office. How has it been so far being at Patreon?
It's emotionally overwhelming. This place is what makes what we do possible, and so it's just been a lot of like smiles and tears all day.
Man, I'm glad that we got to Patreon first, because I'm on Patreon, Mr. Fields is on Patreon, and you're on Patreon. So we already got the plugs out of the way, and now we can get into the show. So Jessica and Edward help run a channel called ADHD, or How to ADHD, on YouTube, and they have about 100,000 subscribers and a lot of people who are just very passionate about mental health and ADHD and learning more about it. So for the people who might not know that much about ADHD, Jessica, could you kind of explain that and explain a little bit about what you do on your channel?
So ADHD, basically the three primary characteristics of it are inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Not everybody has the hyperactive component, so there's like a couple different presentations. The primarily inattentive presentation, which is what Edward has. There's also the primarily hyperactive impulsive presentation, which are the kids who are usually bouncing off the walls and getting into trouble and getting diagnosed early.
Like the stereotypical what people think of.
Yeah. And then there's a combination of both, which is me. So I'm just mostly pretty talkative and fidgety.
Okay. Yeah, Edward, do you want to how about you both describe your personal ADHD and kind of the symptoms that you specifically have in your ADHD? Edward, do you want to start?
Yeah. I'll go first. I mean, Jessica is incredibly well researched on this, and I want to be clear. She created the show. I've helped produce it, and I helped kind of shape it, but in every way, it's her baby, and I'm honored to get to work on it with her. For my ADHD, it's a lot of it has been inattention. A lot of it has been. It's very difficult because I'm sort of, in asking me that, I basically have to just describe to you what life is like for me. Like, I don't necessarily have very good comparisons about what
reference.
Yeah, exactly. But so a lot of it is habits being incredibly hard to form. And I remember I was in therapy, and they would say, "Well, what are your self-care habits or whatever?" And I say, "I don't really have any. They're just boring." It's so, and I remember being on the sofa saying, there was a sofa. It was the most stereotypical one ever.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah. I remember being there, sitting there and going, it's just so boring to do X, Y, Z, brush your teeth, get in the shower, do whatever you got to do. It's just boring. So a lot of it was like, everything feels like mentally exhausting. Everything feels like, I just don't want to. It's going to be a mental hurdle to climb. And what's amazing is, like, physically, it was no big deal. Like, I'm perfectly capable physically, but mentally, it would just feel like I can't be bothered.
So you don't have that hyperactive side that people normally associate ADHD with?
I'm not really, not physically anyway.
Okay.
I have mental hyperactivity.
Okay.
In a big way. But I've thought of myself as a writer since I was like 7 years old. So the idea that my brain is going off in all these directions and I get all these ideas, I'm like, well, I'm just a good writer.
Yeah.
You know, like I was homeschooled, so I didn't have a lot of room for comparison about what was or wasn't normal. So for me, I was just like, I'm a good writer. I got lots of ideas, and I get bored easily, which I thought was great as a creator.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, cool, I will always get bored before the audience does. So fantastic.
Yeah, it's the same with me. It's just like, I didn't know that being sad normally was not a standard for everybody. So just everybody has to work a bunch to feel things, right? And I just that's all I knew for a long time of my life. And then once I figured out that I was bipolar, it was it was so relieving to me because it was like finally attributing like a problem, all of the biggest problems I've ever had in my life to a mental illness rather than myself. Because with depression and the depressive side of bipolar, it's just like you hate yourself and like it's just an endless cycle if you keep going down that road, and then you start to think that that's normal when it shouldn't be.
And I actually struggle with depression and a lot of disassociation for like a long time. Like even like I didn't even fully see the ADHD symptoms until I had started to get through the depression and the anxiety. But that, I mean, we can. That's not. We don't have to get into that right now. But we can get into that if you want. But I'm not trying to derail the conversation. But yeah, I definitely feel you. It's insane. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Jessica, do you want to talk about how your ADHD affects you?
Yeah, my ADHD was, I mean, a little what he talked about where you kind of get bored easily, but you get really passionate about certain things and you can get really hyper focused on them, which is, I think not everybody realizes that people with ADHD don't actually have a deficit of attention, despite the name of it. We don't have the ability to regulate our attention. So sometimes I can't focus on anything for 5 minutes, and other times I get really into something and you can't break me away for like 8 hours. So the hyper focus and the distractibility comes in pairs, and that was a lot of it for me. But also just the inability to like to plan well. Like I love organizational supplies. Like I love going to Staples every year as a kid and getting my new backpack and my new folders and everything and getting really organized, and it would just all fall apart. And it was like so hard to keep myself organized and together because my brain just doesn't work that way. I'm moving at the speed of light. My brain is super fast. And so I just don't have time to like stop and be like, what goes where? Let's put it back. So yeah, I ended up just being really messy, really passionate about things for often short periods of time until like something else shiny caught my eye. And just not great at like things like planning and prioritizing. If something was urgent, it was always more of a priority than something that was important in my life. So I just felt like I was bouncing around for most of my life from project to project, from person to person, never really getting anywhere.
Can I just second all that? Like, it's so hard for me to remember, like, that those sorts of things aren't normal. That, yes, everything you just said. Yes, I've had, yes.
Yeah.
So well said.
But there are some ways in which it's different. So, like, it's much easier for me to transition physically from something to something else, right? Like, if it's time to walk the dog, like it might take him 10 minutes just to get up and go out the door to walk the dog because he's like got to mentally prepare himself for that transition. And meanwhile, I'm like, the Energizer Bunny. I'm like, I'll do that. I'll go here. I'll do this
right away.
Yeah. So I'm definitely more like bouncy and all over the place. And he's more of like the tank engine.
Diesel engine.
The diesel engine. Yeah, like once you get him started, he can just power through. Like he can work through the night. He can work through the next night. It's really
when you hit those grinds, and it's just like I can do anything for as long as it's
That's
possible.
never been an issue for me. In fact, I've long said, even before I knew anything about ADHD, I'm like, well, it takes me a while. It takes me a while to come up to speed, but then don't stop me because I can just keep going. But
yeah, so the transitions, I'm generally a little better at the transitions.
Yeah, definitely.
But I'm also much more impulsive, so I'm much more likely to be like, oh, we're going this way now, and he's like, wait, we need to check the map, we need to know where we're going and what's happening. And
I just made a connection. It feels like my bipolar is kind of like Edward's, kind of like my more like
depressive,
a little depressive side, and you're my impulsive like manic side. So like I'm relating to both sides of just like I have that, and then but like I'm just like struggling in between, and I don't know what's happening some of the times.
We've each got you by an arm.
Yeah, that's what I'm picturing.
That was literally when we got here to San Francisco. I had to acknowledge, I didn't realize, like, because sometimes we would like, because we do have these different styles. Like you're much more. She's so good at like intuitive leaps when it comes to things that I would have to think through. So like we both have a quality of like, oh, this feels like the right direction to go in terms of big career moves or whatever. But
and I'm like, ready, let's go.
Right, but what she's so amazing at is she can just be like, when we have to do math, we have to do a budget, we have to do anything like that. These like sort of intricate, complicated problems. She'll just go click, click, click. It's this. And like, is she 100% right? No, but she's like really close.
I'm close enough to move forward, and meanwhile, he's like, let's make a spreadsheet.
I didn't realize until yesterday. that's why we would like have static, because I would be having like an internal meltdown.
Yeah, just
because it's like
anxiety about it.
I do not know what we're doing right now. I cannot go
In her
on.
mind, everything's fine, and like she knows what's gonna happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the thing is, like, she has this and I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why the channel is so successful. She has this beautiful ability to jump without necessarily knowing where she's going to land, and knowing, and I mean that in a positive way, like, and to know that she can course correct along the way and go, well, I thought I was going this way, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit, and I think it's led to some of the most beautiful, vulnerable things that we've done on the channel. Is you being able to go, I'm not gonna think about
The consequences.
kind of, yeah. I'm not going to think about where this is, what the end result of this is. I'm going to think about, like, I know what I need to do, and I'm gonna get myself there, and I'm not gonna worry about the rest.
That's
and
true.
I think it's amazing.
That's true. And
Those are some of my favorite videos in your channel. It's just where you're like, and like I wasn't planning on making this video, but like this is what happened. This isn't what I was expecting to happen, and like just kind of like when people break down kind of on camera, like you can't say that that's not real for the most part, especially like when like you guys are definitely doing this like for other people and not just yourselves, and that's pretty rare sometimes on YouTube these days. And so I appreciate
those especially
that.
like those are the ones where I've very rarely been involved. I think with any of like the ones you could think of that were the super raw ones. Very rarely have I had anything to do with other than
sometimes he wakes up and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm editing." What are you editing?
Right. Yeah. I think that is probably the only thing that I have been involved in is the editing. Like we collaborate sometimes at different levels on different episodes. Like I definitely directed the homework one. Like that was I had shot lists and everything. We were going nuts on that one. But when it comes to these like really raw emotional things, like I don't usually even see it until she's already gotten a rough cut together. And I'm grateful for that because one, I think what you do on your own is amazing. And two, it lets me have like a really clean slate. And then I just come in as an editor and go, I see what you're doing, and I'm going to communicate that through the language of like cinema. I'm gonna try to make sure that this video expresses what you're expressing.
Yeah, so it's really neat. Even though our brains work so differently, sometimes we work really well together. And I think that part of that is because, I mean, if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. We're not all identical, but what we do have in common, and I think with people with any kind of mental condition, is we understand what it's like to not be neurotypical, to think differently, to not always have complete control over what's going on in our brain. And so I think there's a lot of understanding and empathy that happens there.
And I mean, also, we are ridiculously similar. Like, we're telling you about the 1% that we don't agree on. We actually just, for fun last night, did one of those couples things. And at some point, I think we both forgot whether we were trying to answer for the other person or for ourselves, and the answers were just like okay, anyway, moving on to the next one. Like
any of those like wedding games at your wedding are just not going to be fun at all. You'll get the other person's answers right every time.
We're insanely spot on when it comes to that stuff.
I just think I struggle a lot more with my impulsivity.
And I think I struggle more with like control.
Yeah, and both of those are positives for the most part, but then they can be negatives.
I mean, anything to excess, right?
Creativity is impulsivity gone right. Right?
That's good. Ooh, quote that. I'll write that down. Remember that. All right.
Yeah. So there's like positives and drawbacks to pretty much every ADHD trait, I think. You know, we tend to be really sensitive, which in some cases can make us really empathic and great friends and great listeners, and in other cases it can make it hard to have a conversation with us because we break down crying in the middle of it.
Or just like I can't think of what my version of that is. What do I do? Like you when you get upset, you cry. But what do I do? I guess I just kind of.
You handle it really well, but you've also put up walls.
Yeah, I like that's the other like for me a lot of. In fact, one of the reasons why it's very hard for me to remember my ADHD symptoms is as kind of a defense mechanism through most of my life. Like first 30 some years, I had like walls up. I used to call it the armor.
Yeah.
I think I remember actually, like, I know this sounds crazy, but I remember actually, if you'll allow the metaphor, I remember putting on the armor when I was 12.
Really?
I read God Emperor of Dune, and Leto II had this brilliant mind that he could use to defend himself from anything. And I remember going to have a mind like that, you could always be safe. And so I kind of
years old.
Well, I mean, they gave me the book when I was 12, so I read it.
Yeah, that's very similar to my experience. I remember being like 16 or 15 and just thinking that like I not only have like walls and barriers to people to get to me, but I have like a wall behind that wall and a wall behind that wall. Any question that anybody would ask me that was like a personal question, I knew how I would respond in order to deflect that away. And like people who are depressed, that's why so many comedians are depressed, because they're really good at like deflecting and like being funny about like their depression and stuff. So like I was always like the good jokester kid and being clever and stuff, so I could deflect any personal question like right away just by either making fun of them or making fun of the situation or calling attention to somebody else. So
and I mean I did it too, but in a much different way, which was I would have like a false drawer, so like people would look and they would think they were seeing the bottom, right? I was really open
yes.
to a point, and you couldn't push past that, but nobody ever really tried because you didn't know that everything wasn't just right there. So I would wear my heart on my sleeve, but there were things that you couldn't get to.
That I think that's I would say I'm probably a synthesis of the two of you. That's I cannot, that's such a brilliant way to put that, but it's exactly what it is. You're being authentic in quotes, but there's a false bottom.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm being authentic to the level at which it's comfortable for me.
Right. And like that might even mean to the point of getting some form of emotional, but it's in a back, you fenced it in. This is where it's safe to go that far. You're not really going to hurt.
Yeah, I let them in so much that they don't feel like there's any reason to poke around further, and they're satisfied and they're done. They're done looking. So.
Oh my God,
you're like cynical about it almost.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, man.
Yeah, as soon as I got like balanced on medication, I found myself like overcompensating for my entire life and just being overly open with absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So I'm just like telling everybody every aspect of my super sad, depressing story and like the darkest parts of my life and everything that's gone wrong ever, but then being like, but look who I am now, like get excited with me. But they're like, whoa, you just told me something super sad, how can I get excited right now? I have tears streaming down my face, but I'm like, you see me now, like I'm the redemption story.
I feel like from your point of view, the arc is going, you started at whatever 0, and then you went deep down, and then you come back up and you're higher than you were before. It's amazing. But from their point of view, where you are now is the baseline. So you're just like, it was a long road to get here, and they're like, damn.
I was like, I'm finally normal, and you guys are like thinking I'm crazy, which you actually were, because I was way over normal. I was like manic. So technically you were right, but give me a break. I'm bipolar.
Yeah, but it's empowering. I've found when you talk about your own story, people it gives them permission to have their own. I mean, 1 in 4 people struggles with mental illness or a mental disorder of some sort, and because we don't talk about it, people feel like they're struggling with it alone.
Yeah, that's the goal of this podcast, and I feel like that's a big goal of what you guys do with How to ADHD, and that's why like I'm open in public a lot about like the me having bipolar, my experience with being like hospitalized, which is usually a super embarrassing thing to say, just because I know that some people are going through that, and so basically what I want to do like with my life, which is why like I'm studying counseling, I make videos and I do photos, and now a podcast is just to help people, whether that's through any medium and like through Patreon is another shout out. Both of us are able to do that, and so it's just a great way to be able to do that. And
I feel like we should mention that since we're currently in the studio at Patreon, we are contractually obligated to mention it every 13 minutes.
Yeah, every 13 minutes we'll get that in. Yeah,
this is like NPR. Essentially.
All right, I want to take us through kind of like the chronology of how you guys got diagnosed. So, Jessica, you were diagnosed fairly young, right? Do you want to kind of take us through that?
Youngish, yeah. I was diagnosed when I was 12. So people weren't really worried about me as a kid because I was smart. I loved books. I loved learning, and I had really supportive parents, and so people were pretty willing to overlook the fact that like I came home every day without my jacket or backpack or socks. My mom said she used to get me ready for school in the morning, and she would drop me off. This was when I was like in, I don't know, kindergarten, first grade.
Oh God, okay.
And she would do my hair and put me in a pretty dress and everything. And my dad would pick me up and be like, "You sent her to school like that?" Because he would pick me up and I'd be muddy, my hair would be disheveled, like I'd be missing a shoe. And Mom was like, "Of course I didn't send her to school like that." But there were definitely some early signs. I would be really passionate about anything that I got excited about, but if I wasn't interested, trying to get me to focus on it was like trying to nail Jello to the wall. But I really loved learning, and I loved school, and I loved books. So all the things you're supposed to be good at, in elementary school, I was good at, so nobody was really worried. But we got to middle school and I had to change schools. So I had different friends and, in middle school, you're supposed to know where you're going and what to bring to class and everything. And suddenly you go from being in one classroom where all your books are there to having to remember which books to get and go to your locker and remember your locker combination, which that was an issue some days. So it's just, I really started to struggle with my organizational and planning skills there. And the emotional aspect really started to flare up, like as I hit puberty. I mean, hormones definitely affect ADHD. So I started being like a holy terror. Like I could not regulate my emotions at all. And I would scream at my parents and I felt bad. I didn't want to be like that, but I just felt like I didn't have any control over my emotions or behavior. So my mom was like, well, she reminds me a lot of my sister at that age. And my aunt had just gotten diagnosed with ADHD. So they took me to get checked out.
And there it was.
And there it was, yeah.
And it was your mom's sister, by the way.
It was what did I say?
No, you did, but it was like, was it your sister or your mom's sister?
No, my mom's sister. My sister was really neurotypical, like really, and it drove me nuts because like she was suddenly the golden child and I was like the problem child. But yeah, I got diagnosed with ADHD, but not before a doctor told my mom, well, she can't have it. She can't have ADHD. She does fine in school. That's one of the many misconceptions about ADHD is that gifted students or smart students don't have it, and they do all the time. ADHD isn't picky. So my mom was like, "Thanks for your opinion. I want to see a specialist." So we went to a psychiatrist. Yeah.
So how was like that first? So did you first go in and they kind of were like, "She doesn't have ADHD," and then the second appointment was?
Well, I just know this from what my mom told me. I don't really have clear memories of it, but she said that, we went to my primary care physician's office and my mom expressed these concerns and my doctor was like, no, she doesn't have ADHD. She does too well in school. Because he was probably looking at my report cards from elementary school. I was doing very well in elementary school.
And this is like late 80s at this point. Late 80s, early 90s. It was early 90s.
Early 90s, yeah. So they're just, there still are a lot of misconceptions, but back then there were many more. And so, I didn't look like the stereotypical case of ADHD, so he didn't think that I had it. And so my mom pushed to talk to a psychiatrist, and I'm glad that she did because then I went through a whole proper evaluation.
Yeah. And I think you have a video about that, right? About how your mom like kind of saved you in that realm, and that was a pretty open video, right? And
yeah, that was a letter that I wrote to my mom, and that ended up going semi-viral. There's this woman, and she's not the first person to do it, but there's this woman who made this video that was like what we all want to say to parents who drug their kids or whatever. And before I even watched it, I figured what it was about. So I got angry and I started like writing in the comments, and Edward was like, "What are you doing? Have you even watched the video?" And I was like, "No, I don't need to." And I just started writing. He's like, if you're gonna do this, you should really watch the video. I was like, I'm not writing it to her. I'm writing it to every parent who has ever been criticized for getting their kids the help that they need. Yeah. And so I just wrote this thing out as a comment, and I rewrote it a little bit and posted it on my Facebook page, and it kind of went semi-viral. So I was like, all right, I'm going to make this a video.
That went pretty crazy. It was all over the place. Like Upworthy, Babbel. There was just a bunch of websites that picked it up, and we kept getting emails asking permission. Can we post it here? Can we post it there? And there's more that didn't even ask. They just posted
Which
them.
At the same time made me really happy because the message was getting spread, but also sad that parents needed to hear this so badly because it's like if you took your kid to the doctor for a broken arm or for insulin for their diabetes, nobody would judge you. Yeah. But for mental conditions, they do. They're like, oh, it's just, you're just drugging your kid for being a kid. And it's like, that's so misinformed.
Yeah, I was getting prepared for this podcast and going through a bunch of your videos the other day while at the Patreon office, and I came across that video.
Patreon.
I came across that video, and then like a minute in, like my eyes are watering, and I'm just like, oh no, I'm at like the front desk. There's like 8 people around me. I'm like, I don't care. Like just let it flow because I feel very similar. Like the way my parents helped me out, and like they were. I know that they were judged like so much by all of the people around them, and I have the whole aspect behind me of like coming and growing up like in the church, and so like they like people were expecting like I dropped out of college, and like they were expecting like him, if he's home, like he should at least be going to church, and like should be doing all of these things, and if you're good parents, you would be doing this, and you wouldn't be pill pushing, and you wouldn't be doing all of these things. My mom was like so integral, like she forced me to go to the doctors, because when you're like depressed and like you don't want to do anything, and you start hating yourself, and like you don't want to go and do anything, like you don't even want to feel better because you feel like trash, so like you deserve to feel that way, and it just spirals out of control from there. So like I was suicidal for 2 straight months, and like she knew something was wrong. She didn't know to what extent, because I didn't want to tell them, obviously. But like basically she's the reason why I got switched onto working medication, and essentially was essential in saving my life. And so like having parents who care enough, like all parents care, but not only that, but having parents who are aware of like the situation and aren't closed-minded to other, even though people that are surrounding them are saying, hey, this isn't a problem, like you shouldn't be doing this, and are judging people. And
Right. It can be a really brave thing to go against what everybody, you know, especially when it's your
Especially with
family
parenthood,
members. Yeah.
Just because so much of that, I mean, you know, so much of being a parent is stuff that you learn from your parents or stuff that you read. Like society has a very big influence on the way people parent.
Right, and
either
the
in
media does
positive or
not.
negative.
The media does not cover. I mean, I don't think the media covers any mental conditions very well.
That's
But
why we have to do things like this.
yeah,
Right,
exactly. But I mean, there just are so many misconceptions that go around that I almost understand when parents are reluctant to put their kid on medication, because it, you know, the media is fueled by controversy, right? So anytime there's like a study out that's like, maybe it's actually terrible for you, or you know, this killed this person or whatever, it's like that's what goes viral. The negativity is what goes viral. And so that's why I wanted to do a video where it's like, look, this isn't ironically, it went semi-viral, but this isn't usually the stuff that goes viral. But like, I did another one, which is what happened when I went off my meds. And I was like, sometimes we need to hear that it's okay that we need medication, because all we hear is you should be doing something different. You know, there's something wrong. Like just go out and exercise more, or don't eat sugar or whatever. Like that's going to fix everything. And for some people, maybe it does, but very rarely does that fix the issue.
Yeah. My psychiatrist is just like, I was like, is there ever like a point where you see me like getting off of medication? And before I finished the word medication, he's just like, no. And I'm like, I guess I was that serious, or like my type of bipolar. I know like with ADHD, it's a spectrum, and similar with bipolar, maybe not as much, but like some people can go off of their medication and some can't. But you definitely have to be talking with your doctors and making sure every step along the way, like you're doing it the right way, and are like trying substitutes as well. Maybe if you're going the natural route, but like I am so comfortable staying with like working medication that's been tested.
Yeah, if it's working, you know, it's been tested. I mean, ADHD medication has been proven to be extremely safe.
And extremely effective.
Yeah, and extremely effective. And so, yeah, the fact that there's a stigma against it is a little bit heartbreaking, because so many people feel like they just have to struggle through 3 feet of water to get anything done when they don't have to. And I don't think that medication is the answer for everyone. Everybody's brain is different. But yeah, I want to live in a world where you don't have to feel ashamed if you need medication to treat a medical condition that you're living with.
And I also like, oh, my hackles just go up at that definition of taking the natural route. It's like it's not technically natural to take anything. Right? Like to do anything about your health, it's not natural. What's natural is like dying at 25. Okay? That's technically what just happens. And we've found ways to not do that. And also, like, it's not scientists like creating chemicals out of a computer in the lab. These are all sourced from natural places. We found that this juice from this tree does this. If you mix it's just an understanding. It's an advanced understanding of the natural world.
Yeah, but people can definitely argue that like if they want to like lean off of medication that has some side effects and stuff, they'll take like the vitamins of these certain elements. So
there's I don't see anything wrong with that. It's just when people start to draw this hard line between what is medical and what is natural, it's like, no, there's no,
Everything is natural.
yeah.
Technically.
Everything is natural,
Right.
and technically nothing is. It's both.
Yeah.
And what can be tricky is that a lot of the stuff that's quote natural, that's stuff that has not been put through studies, that has not gone through rigorous testing, and so
That's why you
just
need to
because-
talk to your doctor
just
the
because
entire time.
just because it's natural doesn't mean it's safe.
Yeah, like what's the old joke? Like, what's natural medicine that's been? What do you call natural medicine that's been proven to work?
Medicine.
Medicine. It's just called
Right.
medicine.
Right. And I'm not saying that like natural solutions aren't helpful for people or whatever. I just really want to see that stigma reduced of, if you're trying something and it's working for you, then there's nothing wrong with that. And you shouldn't have to be embarrassed about it or feel like, well, maybe if I, make kale smoothies every morning, then I won't have to take this medication that's clearly effectively working for my life.
And I want to be clear. Like, I'm not. If somebody has found, like you said, if somebody's found a method of any kind in any source that works for them and they're healthy and it works, I have no problem. Like if eating the bark of some tree works for you, like, or making smoothies, great.
Yeah.
I have no criticism against anybody that does that. The criticism that I level is when you attempt to use this concept of the pure natural world to inflict guilt and shame on people and say, why would you put chemicals in their body? You should be doing it naturally. It's like,
exactly. And I wish Laura was here because I think she's gone off of medication and like been very communicative with her doctor, and like her version of bipolar is pretty different from mine, and like she's been able to like communicate that and take all of these different things. So I'm sure she would have some great insights on this. But, yeah.
And again, if it works,
exactly.
But what I would like to encourage people to do is if something works for you, just to understand that everybody's brain is different. And so what works for you or what worked for you is, we have a tendency to go, wow, this worked for me. Like, I want everybody else to know my solution because it worked so well. I would never, even though medication's effective for me, I would never tell anybody else that they should take it. And I would hope that nobody would tell me like, hey, making a kale smoothie and working out for an hour every morning helped me, so that's what you should do. It's like everybody's brain is different. And I also don't think that there's any one solution. So like medication is extremely effective, but one of the reasons I started my show is I realized that medication wasn't enough and I was missing strategies, right? Pills don't teach skills.
Yeah. And I wanted to cycle back to the chronology and also just actually we talk a lot about like the stigma, and that's basically why we do what we do, is to like decrease the stigma around mental health, to like to spread awareness and to also just educate people and give people who have these mental illnesses more things to be aware of, and that they can like use these tools that we're giving them and that scientists have proven to be true, so that they can apply that to their own lives. But I feel that like with ADHD, there's way more stigma with like ADHD and ADD. Can you describe like the difference between the two, and also like how people have said that like that's not even a disease or not even a disorder, and like I hear that all the time and like very conservative like circles. So if you want to just talk on that.
Yeah, so ADD is actually an outdated term that's not used in the DSM-5 anymore in any diagnostic manual. But a lot of people still use it because it very easily and quickly says, hey, this is the inattentive presentation of ADHD.
And people usually use it negatively, and like at least in my experiences, like growing up, like kids have been, oh, you're just being ADD.
Oh,
and, like,
yeah.
I feel like that, like I know I used that like growing up, like as an 8-year-old or something, and only not even knowing what it was, and like even making jokes about like people, wow, this girl's so bipolar. Come to find out, I'm bipolar.
Whoops.
So like, yeah, if you ever like use mental illnesses to like make fun of other people, stop.
By the way,
Yeah.
by the way, I feel so bad because there's this thing I can't stop using, which is I can't stop describing something wonderful or interesting as crazy or insane.
Yeah.
I can't stop. I'm
But I
trying
feel like since
so
we are
hard.
crazy and insane, we can use it, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, I get to call myself.
But
that.
I am a little conscious of that, and I try to say that's wild.
Yeah.
But it
Wild.
doesn't feel
Wild
as
is still
satisfying.
there.
We've started using in the office like just, that's nuts, and like emphasizing the nuts.
I like that.
And then like
I
I
like
know
that.
like John Green uses like that's bananas because he doesn't want to like
Oh,
use those
that's
words
good.
too.
That's
Yeah.
good.
I do insane and crazy all the time, and I can't get out of it. It's like saying hey you guys when some like technically like
It's
a
a
all
group of
ladies.
girls.
Yeah.
like yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
No. What was?
Have you
What
had
was
any
saying?
experience like with people like just saying your disorder isn't a
Oh,
thing?
here's the thing.
Yeah, you have much more experience with it than me.
Yes. So yeah, people will say, well, like you get distracted, so I get distracted too. Like everybody's a little ADD, right? That's the thing that you hear all the time, and what I don't think they understand. And the same thing for people who are like, well, it's just kids being kids. You're just medicating childhood. Everyone experiences ADHD symptoms sometimes, right? We all get distracted. We all lose our keys. We all space out in the middle of a lecture or a podcast. Some people may have spaced out in the middle of this one, right?
Wake up, like, Joe.
Yeah, Joe. Like that's the one guy you know is listening.
Just like came up and was like, oh crap, I doesn't know.
Right. So it's completely normal to experience these symptoms, and so I think that's why people have a hard time taking it seriously as a disorder, because they're like, well, that's just normal. It's just life, right? But something's not diagnosed as a disorder unless it's really deviant and distressing. So unless, I mean, by definition, unless I am significantly more impaired than my peers, I'm not going to be diagnosed with ADHD, right? If I'm just running around the classroom, but so is everybody else, well, yeah, that's just childhood, right? But if we're in 7th grade and I'm running around the classroom while everybody else is able to sit quietly and regulate their behavior and their movement, and I'm not, like, that's deviant. That's different, right? And so that alone is
in the purest sense of the word, to deviate from the norm.
Yeah. So it's different, right? So you're not diagnosed with ADHD unless you have multiple symptoms that chronically and significantly impair multiple aspects of your life. So it's not the same thing to say, well, yeah, everyone's a little ADD, or, well, I get distracted, so what's the big deal? It's like, okay, do you deal with this to the point where your life goes off the rails on a regular basis and you have to fight to get back on track? Do you forget things so often that you put your job at risk, right? Like on a regular basis, because that's what I do. You know, I can't tell you how many times I was on my way to work waiting tables and realized I need to stop at Macy's and buy some pants because I did not remember my pants. Like, it significantly impacts my life in a major way. And so I didn't used to get offended, but I get a little bit like on edge now when people say that, because it's the fact that people are so dismissive of the idea of being ADD or ADHD is one of the reasons I didn't take it seriously myself. And I went so long without the support that I needed, because I didn't think it was a big deal.
Yeah, I didn't think I was depressed, because I was like, everybody has it worse than me if they have depression. So why even like check? Like, I'm not even worth like looking into that. And like comes out, I was severely depressed.
Yeah. So when we take it lightly, it's not just like offensive, like, oh, I have that, how dare you? No, it's like, well, I have that, so it's just a joke. Okay, cool. It's just a joke that I have this thing. And then I never take it seriously, and I never get the help that I need.
And also, I mean, I've been very fortunate in that I had issues with depression and anxiety, and those were really sort of the touchstone issues for me. So by the time I came through that, finding out I had ADHD was much easier to process.
Feel free to go in depth if you want to, real quick, about like how the overlaps of ADHD and anxiety and depression. Is there any like something that you want to hit and let people know?
Well, I don't know that I can speak. I think Jessica could probably speak more on like classically the comorbidities of like how like anxiety, depression, how those, you know, self-esteem issues, how those kind of tie into ADHD.
So ADHD often comes with friends. Like, more often than not, will come with a learning disability like dyslexia or dyslexia or dyscalculia.
I like how you say comes with friends.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, it's a party, party in your brain. Anxiety is really common. About 30% of people with ADHD also experience anxiety. Depression is very common. And a lot of these things are either made worse or come about through having undiagnosed and untreated ADHD. So when we were talking about side effects of medications, absolutely. And you want to try and find a medication with no to few side effects that's where it's clearly benefiting you more than it's getting in your way. For me personally, the only side effect I have is mild appetite suppression, and I just deal with it by I have breakfast before I take my medication, I snack throughout the day, and then I have dinner at night, and it's fine. My weight is stable. It's fine. Where was I going?
Oh, you were saying about the comorbidities.
Right.
Yeah.
So the thing to understand is that untreated mental conditions have side effects too.
Yeah.
Right? Not treating it has side effects too. Low self-esteem, self-medicating with other substances.
I mean,
ADHDers are at a greater risk for addiction in general. But I've heard from a lot of people who are like, I never got recognized, diagnosed, treated, and I became an alcoholic. I ended up becoming a sex addict. I
Same
ended
with
up
bipolar, like
Food,
alcohol,
all
like
that.
excels like mania and like makes people go crazy.
right.
When I was going to the sort of the expression of that, like you know, if you want to harken back to that, at like 12 years old, you know, you put
Mhm.
on the armor,
Yeah,
right? And what was beautiful about that was beautiful in my mind at the time
Yeah.
was that like I was impenetrable, right? Because I had a deep abiding
Isn't
fear
it
of
so
people.
funny how we romanticize like the
Oh
stupid
yeah.
things, everything?
See,
Like
but to
we
me,
think
I
it's
like
so cool because
I
like,
can't
man,
not
I've got
still a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like
I
even when
know.
you said it was
Yeah.
stupid, I'm like, it's not stupid, but it's definitely not helpful.
No.
Well, you develop coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Definitely. If you're not getting the kind of support that you need, you just try and get through life the best you can. And
Yeah.
so
And
one
that
of the
was-
coping mechanisms for you is to, you know, because
Shut
ADHDers
everything
tend to
down,
be
yeah.
really sensitive, like
Oh yeah, that
highly
was the other
sensitive.
thing. So I was, if I may,
Yeah.
So essentially, I was incredibly insensitive.
Mhm.
That was the expression of
In
what was
quotes.
going on.
Mhm.
Yeah, in quotes,
yeah, in quotes.
insensitive. But what was actually happening is I was intensely
Yes,
sensitive.
that's me. That's
and
me to
I
a
had-
T.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
the super emotional dudes who like want to get out of these shows. We're like, no, I got armor. I've got
Exactly.
walls.
But see, I loved it. I loved
Yeah.
it. It let me I traveled the world in that armor. I gave speeches in front of huge crowds in that
Yeah,
armor,
yeah.
and I could always just feel
down.
slide down, no problem, ready to go. Like but the problem was, and I didn't realize this until I was about 30 or 31,
Wow.
is that I look back and realized my life had like disappeared because I had spent my whole life in this armor. I didn't really have that many memories. Like I could remember things that happened, but like if you asked me how I felt about something, I'd be like, I don't even understand how to answer that question.
Yeah, they haven't yet invented the kind of armor that can let only the good things through.
Right? Exactly right. It's a kind of cheesecloth. But no, so so for me what happened was going in and out of another relationship and realizing it was the exact same relationship I'd had like 8 times before.
Mm.
And at that point you go, okay, well, if they're all ending the same way and they're all having the same experiences and they all seem like the same person, clearly there's something wrong with me. Or
Yeah.
something needs to be
Same
examined.
thing happened with me.
Yeah. So, really? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
It break up and then it just accelerates into depression and it spirals out of
Yeah.
there. Did that happen cyclical with you? Every different girl that you were with, or just mainly like the last one?
Well, so it would start with like intent. I mean, so this is where the ADHD comes into play, right? Which I hadn't even really thought of till now, just going back through my memories of it. It starts with intense fascination, intense focus on this person, and then kind of a dwindling of interest. And the thing about ADHD is it's not like you're spoiled, which I think is what a lot of people assume.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, you're just not trying hard enough. You got to imagine people take for granted the fact that they can redirect their attention and go, I'll pay attention to this now. For people with ADHD, at least for me, I don't want to speak for everybody. It's much more like train tracks. Like once the thing gets flipped and it's set to the left or set to the right, it doesn't matter what you want. It's going in that direction. And so that's how you find yourself falling out of relationships. That's how you find yourself at 4 a.m. going, well, you know what? I probably should get that passport taken care of. Like
Yeah.
I was
And
looking.
you just
for-
have to do it at that
I
moment.
have to do it right
Yeah,
now.
oh,
And
man.
the thing is, like, you don't even want to do it. You're like, it would be better if I went to sleep right now. But
Your brain's like, nope,
No.
we're
but you're
doing
like,
this.
but so like you literally can't turn your attention to sleep.
Yeah.
Your brain's like, it's not. No, I'm sorry. This is what we're doing right now. So for me, a lot of what happened was I was dealing with the depression and anxiety and just deep, like, self-confidence issues. Like there were so many things. And I finally decided to go to therapy, which I recommend to everyone. I have a beautiful, supportive family, but the one thing that we just didn't really consider was therapy. For us, it was always like, well, why are you going to therapy? Talk to your family. I finally went to therapy and just started to peel back like years of just dealing with all this kind of stuff. And I won't go on about it, but the short version is I finally started dealing with that armor, right? And I went through several therapists. They're not all great, you know, they're not all suited for you. Some,
yeah.
I'm sure they were great for other people.
Yeah.
But then I finally found this one who I think I could say amongst her peers, she was called the Queen of Darkness because she was like very existential and just very like death, but in a good way. She's like super positive, but she's like, oh yeah, death happens to everybody. And
She was just dark enough for you.
oh, it was just great because that was one of the things I had also struggled with. Like I started going into depressions when I was like 13 or 14, which again I didn't know till later.
Yeah, same.
Especially about death, just about like the idea of death,
Yeah.
and just I couldn't get over it. I could not get over it, and so we were able to go through a lot of that stuff. And the short version was I worked on all these things. I worked on all these ways that I pushed people away, and how I would stress, and how much I would have these conversations in my head that would just make things just ruin my life, essentially, like ruin my plans. And after I got on some antidepressants that worked for me, like it was great. Like life was starting to balance out.
Mhm.
And at that point, I didn't have anxiety fueling me anymore. I was at this point, she and I were together very, very strongly, and I was unable to get work done because I had no more anxiety. So it took me a long time to realize, oh, that's usually what gets me. Like that was the trigger for the ADHD to like, okay, you got to get going. You're gonna lose your job. Or
Yeah, that
something.
was like one of his coping mechanisms. He would kick himself into gear with anxiety.
Yeah, and then once you kind of have like, it'll be fine. Nothing's getting done. Like nothing's getting done, and so that took a long. And that's when she had been telling me for quite some time that I had ADHD, or she felt I possibly did. She never said I did.
I said, you have ADHD symptoms. I am not a doctor. I will not diagnose
Exactly.
you. It's totally possible that maybe this is a normal experience of depression, but this seems really familiar.
Yeah, because I had enough issues anyway.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I didn't have excuses for my behavior.
But I was like, this seems really familiar. And so he actually was cutting the show for like a good year,
Yeah.
going, this tip is really helpful.
Super helpful. Super helpful. But you know,
This tip must be
You're
helpful for
creating the one
anyone.
thing
This
that's,
must
like,
be
helping
helpful.
yourself. in that
Exactly.
way.
Oh yeah. And and we have this joke about like if you have a heart disease or if you have diabetes or something, they put you on a special diet. Well, the special diet is really what everybody should be eating, but they don't because their body can withstand it.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's kind of what I realized the show was. I thought, well, I'm just a regular person, but these tips would be good for anyone. Everyone should be doing these things.
I'm not going to lie. One or two of those episodes was written in the hopes that he would see it.
Oh, no, I knew
Really?
that. I
And
totally
it
knew
would sink
that.
in.
Well,
I'd be like, I'd see him struggling with something, and I'm like, you know what? I should
Yeah.
write an episode about
So
this because
it-
this is an ADHD symptom.
She kept it really quiet, except that she couldn't help but sit by the computer and go, hint, hint, hint.
You just bold things in the script
Yeah,
so that
exactly
you'll
right.
see it.
She's just like sitting next to me going, does that sound familiar?
Because I knew he had to edit and animate everything that I gave him, so I was like, well,
Had plenty of time to think about it.
this is a good way to get him to listen.
Yeah,
That's good.
exactly. But so anyway, I because at her even my awesome therapist had said you don't have ADHD.
Right.
I would know if you had ADHD.
Oh, wow.
Which, and again,
Yeah,
I
it's not her
cannot
fault.
take away anything from her. She's amazing, and I owe her my life. Like I owe her my relationship. Everything good in my life now starts at me going to for her with therapy. But she, like many people, just doesn't know that much about ADHD. And so in her head, I suspect it was probably she was imagining like a hyperactive, fidgety, can't concentrate sort of person.
Right.
And wasn't really considering the inattentive side.
Yeah.
Right, and one of the reasons why people don't get diagnosed as well is because a lot of times they have coping mechanisms that obscure
Yeah.
what's actually going on. So he has great organizational systems, which is not typical for somebody with ADHD, but it was a coping mechanism. He's like, well, if I know where everything is, then I'll be able to find it
Yeah.
again.
And so some people would think I had like obsessive compulsive disorder,
Mhm.
which I'm sure I have like I don't want to assume or throw things on. I wouldn't, if somebody said you have mild obsessive compulsive disorder, I wouldn't disbelieve them. But what I was just doing was trying to find these methods. And again, I would always work like the hard jobs. Like you shouldn't be doing that job. It's too hard. You don't have enough experience. So I always thought, well, I'm just biting off more than I can chew. And therefore I need all these mechanisms like scheduling and stuff like that.
Yeah, you said that like basically every good thing in your life has come from talking to your therapist. So
Yeah.
I want to like push the point home that like if you're struggling with this, or maybe even if you don't have a mental illness, like everybody could use a therapist, and that's
And-
something that shouldn't be stigmatized. And not only that, the biggest thing that brings you out of these dark times or the things where you're struggling and you don't know what's happening is a support system.
Yeah.
Without a support system, you start to fall.
Mm.
And the biggest way to bring you out of the dark times is to be talking to others about it and be able to shed off that armor, because if Edward and I were willing to like break down those walls and that armor earlier, we could have lived so much more.
You know what's interesting? I first of all, I completely connect with that.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate on one thing, which is I don't find myself consumed with regret. I don't.
neither
I
do
really
I.
don't. Yeah, because it's just like I look at it like everybody's life. You're born into a circumstance, to a certain set of parents, to a certain wealth, to a certain this, and you're going to meet some people. It's like the working out of a formula. If you're born here and you do this and you have these parents, what does that end up equaling? And for me, I just go, well, how else could it have gone? It took me 30 years to get
Exactly.
to the place where I would understand that I
I'm
need to do
so
that.
glad that like I was suicidal for 2 months, and like that's hard for like people to understand.
Yeah.
But like sometimes you have to go that low in order to get feeling as good as I do now.
But if you do feel suicidal, go talk to someone. 'Cause
Yeah,
that's,
immediately.
That's
Yeah.
critical.
And
But
don't
it-
be afraid to check yourself into a hospital.
Oh, yeah.
I've had one guy talk to me about, he heard my story and he was pretty depressed. And even his therapist was like, yeah, you can check yourself into the hospital. Like you might want to really do that if you can't get any appointments into any other professionals that you're supposed to see to get like a psychiatrist appointment to get help and medication. So like, do not be afraid. It's actually not that bad. And I literally have the best stories of my entire life from being in a hospital. I can't go into all of them. We should do an episode just for my stories, because I met a guy named Jonathan who thought he was 1,502 years old and from the planet Kryptonidius, as he would say.
Kryptonidius?
Kryptonidius. He was from Indiana, but like he had a southern accent, and it was the funniest thing. I loved all
he
the
legit
exper-
believe
No,
that?
yeah, and he would like raise up like a Bible and be like, "Do you see the orb of light coming from this book?" I'm like, "No, tell me about it, Jonathan." I had so much fun, to be honest.
That's
So
also
it's-
got to be really cool, because if you meet people in everyday life who might see things you don't see, or have some kind of sort of thing that is not neurotypical, let's say, that can be very disconcerting. Like somebody walks up to you on the street and says, "Do you see this orb of light?" It's like, I see my phone dialing 911.
Yeah. That happens every day in San Francisco.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's no big deal. But what's so fascinating is if you have checked yourself into the hospital for your own treatment, and you are confronted by someone else who also is there for treatment, there's a kind of honesty there.
Yeah,
So he could
everyone
be like, "Do you
bonds.
see
It's
it?"
so
And you're
great.
like, "Nope,
Yeah.
tell me about it."
Yeah,
Exactly,
exactly.
you
And
know?
like I still have like texting buddies from the stress center.
Oh my God,
That was
that's
it.
awesome.
It's like you just understand each other almost immediately. It's like
Yeah.
the best form of summer camp in a hospital. Yeah,
That's awesome.
I wanted to ask you guys about how ADHD affects your relationships, and I'm glad that I have both of you here, because I have a note that says romantic ? And so since both of you are together, I was thinking more initially just like friends and family and how that goes, because I know when I came out as bipolar, it was very difficult for all of my friends and family, because it was like I was a completely different person. And some
wow,
people
yeah.
couldn't accept that. And so I lost a few amazing friends that having that and depression along with that, like it's kind of could fuel it. I was able to have people around me in a support system to be able to talk to these people, and I knew how to get out of the depressive state now, because I never wanted to go back there again. But it was very difficult on my relationships. It was also like I gained like the best relationships out of it, and I strengthened the majority of my relationships. But like some people just can't take it. I was wondering if like you have any experience with like not that specifically, but just how it affects your relationships with friends and family.
Mine is I want to say mine is incredibly fast, and I had so much with the anxiety and depression that when I came out about that, me having ADHD was like, "Oh yeah, I also have ADHD." And you're like, whatever.
Right,
That's
who
it.
cares?
That's
Who
all I
cares,
got.
Edward?
Well, one of the positive things about people not taking ADHD seriously is when you have it and announce to people that you have it, they also don't take that seriously. They don't really look at you a whole lot differently. They're like, "Oh, so you get distracted by squirrels." Cool.
Oh, God.
Anyway, and then it's just on to the next subject. So it doesn't seem like a big deal, but having ADHD definitely affects your relationships. Yeah, Edward talked about it a little bit earlier, but having that intense fascination with somebody at the beginning,
Yeah.
like we're really into things that are new or novel, things that are
Mhm.
challenging, and relationships at the beginning like are very new and exciting and challenging and can hold our interest really well. But over time, like we, just like a project, like we'll set that down and be like, okay, now I'm interested in learning the ukulele. And then
Yeah.
like, what? I have a boyfriend. I forgot. Sorry.
Shoot, he's still in the car.
Yeah.
And when both of us get in like that impulsive mode, just to like want to do this and do it faster, and like you just try to like accelerate a relationship when that's not how you should approach it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did a lot of accelerating a relationship.
Did you
like
do that to Edward?
No,
No.
We have an
Okay.
interesting. I'm gonna.
Okay.
Let, I want
Ooh,
you.
I'm
I want
ready,
to
I'm
let
ready.
you
You
say.
could do a
tell
whole
that.
podcast about this, couldn't you?
Oh,
yeah,
dude.
totally. I mean, I did a whole video on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll link all the videos that are mentioned, hopefully, if I remember to, in the show notes so that you can go back and check
Yeah.
them all out.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I did a video that was very personal called ADHD in Relationships. And some people were very upset about this video because they're like, well, I don't do that. I'm not like that. And I'm like, I'm not saying everybody does this, but I ended up in a situation where I would get into relationships because they were new and exciting and not really like think about whether this is the person I want to be with. It's just like I wanted to be in a relationship and I needed that fulfillment, and I would be really excited about them at first, but then I would lose interest and I would like move on from relationship to relationship. And I also had a hard time hurting people's feelings, and so I wouldn't always be honest with them when I wasn't into them anymore, and I would try and make it work until it was clear that it didn't, and I would like get distracted and I would go off into another relationship, and it was just like it was a very bad cycle. But I could definitely tell how my ADHD was impacting it because I was treating relationships like I treated my hobbies. Like I'll be interested in this hobby until like something else catches my eye and I'm not excited about this one anymore. So I'm going to go off and do this other thing. And it wasn't a healthy way to be, but it was part of my story, and so I wanted to share it. So I get one of two reactions on that video, which is one is like, "Thank you for sharing that because I thought I was just a horrible person," and it's nice for people to know that they're not alone or that they're not doing it on purpose or trying to hurt people. But I did inadvertently hurt a lot of people,
Same.
and I feel really awful about that. But what I present as a solution in that video is to be honest, like from the start. Be honest about what you want in a relationship. Be honest about if this person is right for you. Be honest if you start to not feel it anymore. And one of the most painful things that I ever learned, and I didn't learn it until after I got married and got divorced, was that one of the kindest things that you can do for somebody is to let them know when you're not interested in that relationship anymore. It's not actually doing them any favors to stay with them longer to try and make it work when it's clearly not working, because at some point you're going to end up leaving or breaking their heart or it's not going to be a satisfying relationship for them either, because they're constantly going to feel like you're half there, right? So my only regret getting married and getting divorced was not admitting to myself and to him earlier that it wasn't working, that I didn't want to be there anymore. I was just delaying the pain. I wasn't avoiding it, but it was really hard to, it can be really hard to be honest about your feelings in a relationship. So when I got into a relationship with Edward, one of the first things that I did was I made rules. I was like, all right, I need to have some guidelines. Like I need us to both be honest. If I'm not feeling it, and I knew he had
similar. Yeah, our stories basically are exactly the same in terms of that. What she just described.
Yeah, we were heartbreakers, and not
and
in a good way. Like not in a I'm conquering the world. In a way like I didn't mean to hurt people, but I keep hurting people.
And because you get so fascinated with someone, like you kind of for a while, we used to talk about this a lot in the beginning, being perfect boyfriend or perfect girlfriend. Because you become so fascinated, and you're such a people pleaser, and you want to make people happy, and you have the creativity and the intelligence to do that.
Right. So we would make people fall in love with us and like really be great partners to
And
them
that
without
so arrogant,
Yeah,
but
I
it's
so
true.
get that though. Just like set them up, throw up the ball real high, and then just like slam them down.
You just love bomb them
inadvertently.
essentially. You just
Love
give
bomb,
them so much of your attention.
Yeah, and even in good ADHD relationships, it can be tricky because there's always going to be much more fascination at the beginning, and you have to understand that when that person with ADHD stops giving you that same level of attention, it doesn't mean that they aren't into it anymore. Sometimes it does, which is why being honest is important.
First
But
rule.
But for the most part, like it's just a natural part of having ADHD is your attention is going to ebb and flow. So to not take that personally is important, but also to be real and expect the person that you're with to be honest with you. And so I promised Edward that I'd be honest with him, and I wore a Claudia ring, and I was like, look, if I want to be in the relationship, I have it faced a certain way that says I'm in a relationship, and the second I don't want to be in this relationship, all I have to do is turn that ring around. I have to be honest with not only him but with myself as to whether or not I want to be here. And
you had to make it a conscious decision.
Yeah, to make it a conscious
decision.
decision.
Couldn't just like erode.
Yeah, so that I didn't just like slowly fade out of the relationship without letting the other person know.
and to be clear, she didn't like. It was about 2 or 3 weeks later when I realized, oh, she'll tell me as well. I don't just have to keep checking the ring.
He did. He straight up checked the ring like every time we saw each other.
In the middle
for like
of the
3
night,
weeks.
just like, sorry, I have to check.
Yeah, just making sure.
Waking up constantly.
Okay, fine.
But
Hey,
that
honey, I brought the popcorn.
But that one little token of like a Claudia ring was my reminder to myself to be honest about whether or not I wanted to be here, and if I didn't want to be here, that was okay. I just needed to admit that to myself and to the person that I'm with.
And we had basically this, because again, we were both struggling with those same things. We literally had that conversation where we both said, I give you permission to break my heart. Do not stay here. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, because for a while we're like, wait, you are a heartbreaker and so am I.
Oh yeah, we were.
Let's see who breaks whose heart first.
Yeah,
it was like
I
scary.
had so much experience before.
It was scary. Neither of us had ever been like maybe. Oh no, we both had one when we were super young. That
broke our heart.
That broke our heart.
Broke off every relationship you ever had?
Other than the first one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So it was very scary to meet somebody who's like your match.
Yeah, it's like what do they call it when cars drive toward each other?
Chicken.
Yeah, we were playing
you're playing
relationship chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like, I don't know, somebody's gonna hurt somebody. I don't know who it's
Yeah.
gonna be. And in the end, we just decided to get married and forego that entire destruction
that was
entirely.
That was what when I was talking to my therapist, I said, you don't understand. She's just like me. I'm not confident. This is not. I don't know what's gonna happen. I was legitimately scared for my own heart. I had not been that way for 10 years, 15 years. And my therapist goes, yeah, I mean, you might hurt each other deeply, or you might understand each other on such a deep level that you'll never want to be with anyone else again.
Yeah, you guys are talking so happy, so I want to bring us real down right now.
Do it. Let's do it.
What is the most like difficult experience or like a difficult thing that you've had to go through because of your ADHD? Is there any like specific moment or specific feeling that you've had to gone through? And if you have one, I know I definitely do. You don't have to say it, or like I'm okay with talking about mine in certain scenarios, but I don't want to go too descriptive in other scenarios because I don't want to give anybody ideas or anything. But yeah,
I feel like I should go first because I know yours is going to be a barn burner. Okay, I just know you're going to kick ass. I'll just be brief.
No pressure.
Yeah, so just cut this whole joke. I'm just conferring with my associate.
Go for it.
For me, it's just a lot of lost opportunities, and I didn't. But again, I did not have the wherewithal or the awareness to know that that's what was happening. But now I look back and I see so many times in my life where I felt that burning desire to prove myself. And then the moment I had proven myself and I was about to reap the rewards of that and begin to move to different levels in my life, like significant levels where if I said them right now, people would be like, you walked away from what? I just couldn't bring myself to keep doing it. And I thought I was afraid. I thought I was this. I thought I was that. But the truth was I just could not summon the interest or mental energy to pursue once I knew I had won. It was basically another analog to the relationships I had, where once I know I have you, I mean, that sounds so weird.
Yeah,
Well,
no, we
once
get
it's
it,
no
yeah.
longer challenging,
Once it's no longer challenging,
Yeah.
once I know that I've got this down and I can do this,
it doesn't engage your brain
I'm
anymore.
not engaged. I don't care. And but the problem is that that's usually where the career takes off, is where you get to the point where, oh, you've got this down. Now you can repeat and repeat and repeat and go somewhere amazing. And I think I can think of like 3 or 4 different careers in the creative fields that I could. I mean, just it breaks. I don't even want to tell you what they are, but they are so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
They're like the and then this happened, and everything exploded after that. Like I have like 2 or 3 of those, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar in the way of like this past year, I've been willing to like just ask people like, hey, can I join you in what you're doing? Because previous to that, I'm just like, nobody wants to hang out with me. But like literally just asking people like, hey, what are you doing? You mind if I come with? Like, I've had some of the best times and experiences just because I'm willing to ask that. And like people are like, like 9 times out of 10, right? They're just like, yeah, sure, come along. And like I just naturally thought that everybody disliked me. And so like there's probably an infinite amount of like missed opportunities that I just don't know about.
That's amazing.
You're
I'm
only
stealing
good
that.
enough. Yeah, you're only good enough if you excel. That's what used to go through my head all the time.
Yeah.
Like you don't deserve to be there unless you're the best.
Unless nobody could possibly argue that you shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Like,
That was my big one. But I want to hear yours.
Yeah, here we go.
I'm
ready.
so
No sincerely.
it
no
is
pressure.
not a barn burner.
No.
So my lowest point was actually I recorded it. I have it somewhere, and it was almost going to be the first episode of this channel, and Edward was like, really not a good idea.
Not-
It's really
such
far
a
too
big
depressing.
coincidence, but finish your story.
Okay.
Not what you'd call a good tone setter.
Yeah. So I basically went on this trip with one of my best girlfriends at the time, who I didn't particularly like. Because I mean, I'll
And
say
her
it.
name is Carly.
Yeah.
Please
It's
don't
not-
be okay.
It's not Carly. There's another person who's important in our lives called Carly, and we were just like,
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Carly.
Sorry, Carly.
No, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I would be friends with people because they wanted to be friends with me, and I wouldn't really think a whole lot like, how do I actually feel about this person, or how do I feel in their presence? So I would just I would be a friend to them without really worrying about getting my needs met, which was not something I recommend. But I was just like, well, they want to be friends with me, so I'll be friends with them. And this is one of those situations, and she wanted to go to Vegas for her 40th birthday, and I was like, okay, I'll go. And it's not my scene.
Yeah.
And she wanted to do all this partying, and that's definitely not my scene. But I was like, I wanted to be supportive. I was like, it's one of my best friends, and like she's turning 40, and I want to support. So I put myself in an uncomfortable situation, and like I was dating Edward at the time. I just started dating him, but like it was at the beginning of the relationship when there was a lot of like being honest about our issues and stuff like that. So it was not like a particularly like joyous time in our relationship. It was
I
very
loved it,
like,
though.
did you?
Only 'cause,
It
like-
felt very safe to you.
I was so upset because we were like, the only things that really would appeal to me are like the negativity. Like, because if someone's being negative with you or being like brutally honest, they're not lying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love
And that
depressed
felt-
people so much. It's so messed
But
up.
it was a lot of work. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
we were putting a lot of work into our relationship, and I
A lot
went
of talking.
hmm and I went to go to Vegas with this girl, and I was just like, you know what? Like I've had issues with like getting distracted by other boys and stuff like that. I really am working on this relationship. I really like this relationship. I just ask one thing, like, we're gonna go party. Just keep boys away from me, like, or keep me away from boys. Like, I just don't want to even deal with that. I don't want to deal with the temptation or the distraction or just like, I don't know. I just was not comfortable being in a situation where I'm going to be partying and around a bunch of guys without my boyfriend with me.
Yeah.
So that's all I asked. But we went, and she, I was going to help her film something, and I kept trying to like help her out with that and help her with her lines, and she just didn't seem interested in taking it seriously at all. She just wanted to party, and I was like, okay, this is frustrating, because this was actually not the first year she'd brought me out to help her shoot this exact thing.
Yeah, you were there not only to celebrate, but you were there primarily to help her with this project.
Yeah, she had a
as well.
project that she wanted to shoot.
Yeah,
She-
so you're out there for business in
Yeah.
some ways.
Yeah. So, but I understood she wanted to party too, and that's fine. But like, she wasn't taking this seriously at all. It felt like she was kind of wasting my time. And we went to party after party, and I got exhausted. And I was like, look, I'm going to hang back at the room. And she's like, okay. And she let somebody else stay in the room as well. And it happened to be a guy. And he started hitting on me while I'm in my hotel room. And I'm just like, I was so deeply uncomfortable with this situation that I ended up, Edward had to bring me home on a Greyhound bus. And we got into a huge fight over it, me and my friend. But
We did not fight. She and I did not fight.
yeah, but even before that, like I just was realizing like I wasn't getting my needs met, and I wasn't doing anything to take care of myself. At one point, I found myself like my phone was completely out of charge because I hadn't thought to charge it. I had one contact in because like I'd lost a contact in the pool somewhere, and like I didn't bring extras. I think I was probably sunburned or something like, and I was on the floor in a casino in Vegas, going, "What am I even doing here? I don't like this scene. I don't particularly enjoy hanging out with this person. Like,
Mm.
I don't have anything that I need. Like, my needs are completely not getting met. And what am I doing with my life, by the way?"
Oh.
And it was just a really sobering moment of I don't I don't take care of myself or listen to myself at all, and I've ended up in this situation. And how did I get here? Well, it's my behavior that got me here. Like, how did I mean, I'm 32 years old. Like, what am I doing with my life on the floor of a Vegas casino with one contact in, with people that don't care about me or I'm not particularly enjoying being with. So yeah, it wasn't like a, I'm ready to commit suicide moment or anything, but it was the first time I fully admitted to myself that the way I was trying to live my life was not working.
Mm. The video is powerful. It's powerful in the
So
level.
that inspired you to make a video and to start your channel? Is that what it was?
I had already decided that I'd already kind of like hit bottom with my life and decided, you know what, I need to start figuring this out. I need to start looking into ADHD and everything. But like, this was like, I had hit my bottom and now I sunk a little bit lower. And I'm like, screw it. I'm not going to wait for getting my lights together and my camera and everything. I'm just going to film this as my first episode because I'm just feeling so terrible right now and so alone and lost and not sure what I'm supposed to be doing with my life and everything. I made that the first episode, but yeah, it's the unreleased first episode, the episode 0, if you will.
All right. Do you want to know the first episode of Mr. Fields podcast?
Yeah.
It was me coming back from a John Foreman concert in the basement to some guy who I don't even know, my friend's older brother, recording an audio message because I was just so excited to be happy for the first time. And so I was like hypomanic and like in a very manic state. But I wasn't able to like talk normally because it was like 5 a.m. and I didn't get any sleep that night or the night before because like you don't sleep when you're manic.
Right.
And so I'm like whispering because I don't want to wake up anybody. And like I sent this podcast to like a couple friends and like freaked them out because it just sounds like I'm crazy because I guess I was crazy. But like you can hear, I'll put this in for the patrons only. I think there's a moment where I come up with the idea of the name Mr. Fields podcast in this thing. And so I thought that I was going to release that as the first episode. Listen to like 2 minutes of it. I was like, after like being normal, and I was like, wow, that sounds horrible. That's never gonna see the light of day.
Yeah. That's too funny.
But yeah, well, just one more question then to go off of that is, what's the best part about having ADHD?
Oh gosh. I actually like a lot of things about having ADHD. I like how creative and fun I can be, and I enjoy my impulsivity because it takes me on all kinds of fun adventures and things. But I honestly would say that the best thing about it is having a tribe, like having other people that I can connect to that are just as fun and creative and spontaneous and impulsive and like also get themselves into ridiculously just ridiculous situations because they didn't think things through first. And I just so enjoy connecting to these other amazing people that to me is my favorite thing is I get to be a part of this cool club.
That like at the end of your intro video, like it's the first video you see if you go on their YouTube channel. It's the first video you see, I believe, if you're on their Patreon. You end it with "Welcome to the tribe." As soon as I heard that, my eyes started watering because like you never feel welcome when you're struggling with a mental illness and people look down on you. But like having like the term tribe, like these are my people and people care about you. And not only that, like we can help each other out.
Then they know they understand you.
Yeah.
Like they understand you in a way that nobody else does.
Yeah, and for so long, in life, it feels like you're on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And to be on the inside is just kind of really exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
To feel like you
Edward,
belong.
do you have one?
Oh, what?
Would that be your favorite as well?
What's that?
Of
Having ADHD? No, mine should definitely go before hers again. She just always in the edit just put my answer before hers because hers always crush. Mine is just kind of, I guess, selfish in a way, but I like my ADHD. I like knowing I have it, and I like my ADHD for a couple of reasons. And the first one is I already have it, So knowing I have it means, okay, I can start to work out how do I work with my brain? Like, instead of comparing myself to other people and why aren't I as successful as them, I can just go, okay, I just need to learn about myself and go from there. And the second one is, so there's two more. That's what it is. The second one is that I love hyper focus because you can fight it or you can go with it. And when you go with it, it feels like this is the only thing you were ever meant to do. And it feels like, honestly, as silly as it is, it feels like that moment in Finding Nemo when they jump into the transit Austrian whatever, where all the turtles, where you're not having to do any effort and you move so fast and you can get so much done. I love that feeling. And
they call it riding the wave.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. And then I also like that I get bored really easy because I work in entertainment, and so it's my job to not bore others. So if I don't bore, I feel safe knowing if I'm not bored, odds are they'll be fine.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, thank you guys for joining me on this podcast.
Dude,
I'm so
such a
excited to
pleasure.
have you over. Just everyone should check out How to ADHD. Check out their YouTube channel. Support them on Patreon, if you will. Mr. Fields Podcast also has a Patreon page. We'll put up a little extra audio of the genesis of Mr. Fields Podcast just for patrons only. So thank you again for being around. It was awesome.
Dude,
Thanks for having us.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah, this was a very good time, and I'm glad we had this conversation. So thanks for listening, and welcome to the tribe.
Aww.
Thank you so much for listening. Jessica and Edward were two of the nicest people I've gotten to talk to, and it was so great just to have such an open conversation with them. I was very appreciative of how open they were able to be, and I hope you were too. Thank you to those of you who have reached out to either Laura or me in support of the podcast. It really means a lot, and knowing that we've helped just one person makes everything worth it, and just the overwhelming support that we've gotten in doing this has just been really nice. So if anybody else wants to give us some nice compliments to feed our incessant need of validation, feel free to tweet either Laura or I, or you could also email mrfielspodcast@gmail.com. And we'd also really appreciate it if you would check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/mrfields. Right now, we just have 2 patrons, and one of them was our last guest, and the other one, I think, was his roommate. So if you would go and check that out and consider donating, we're actually donating a portion of all the proceeds to our Patreon to charities like To Write Love in Our Arms or whatever charities you actually want, just to help those who struggle with mental illness. So one of the perks is you get to decide which charities we vote on to donate to. And we think that that's a really cool idea. And those of you who support the podcast get to choose where some of the money goes in support. So go do that if you're inclined, and definitely check out How to ADHD. They also have a Patreon, and they just make such good videos. I highly encourage you to check it out. We'll include everything that we talked about, including all of their videos and the specific ones mentioned in this episode in the show notes. That's about it. If you're interested in learning more about ADHD, we've included some resources on our website, mrfielspodcast.com, in a blog post with lots of things that Jessica recommended that I share with you. Thank you again for listening. The music is by the wonderful Driftless Pony Club, who's going to take us out. 1, 2, 3, 4.
What are you offering? Are you offering? Is it free? What are you offering?